darkness, my old friend.
This very well may be the most ambitious project that I've taken on to date. I'm not saying it's the most difficult, but it is definitely the most challenging item I've ever designed from scratch. I've only been woodworking for a little over a year, and I'm really proud of where I am from where I came. The general design for this came together in Fusion 360 in just a few hours, but I spent a month or two changing details here or there and researching the best ways to bring everything together. Even then, as the project went along, I continued to make changes and adjustments, including integrating wireless charging and an inlay into one of the tables. Since I've gone to all the work to design these side tables, I decided to put together a detailed set of plans, which are available for purchase on my website, www.windfirewoodwork.com/store. Right through the entire build, my ultimate goal was to wrap the grain of this walnut around the 3 visible edges of the tables. This was certainly more difficult than I expected. I succeeded on my wife's table, but mine didn't quite come together that way. Don't get me wrong, I think it still looks great, it's just not what I originally intended it to be. If you're wondering about the process I generally use to joint boards for projects, I'll link another video I did down below. That said, after getting all of my pieces milled up, I proceeded to cut them to their final dimensions and moved on to cutting my miters. I hate cutting miters. Like seriously. I was running into an issue using my Incra miter gauge where my work pieces wouldn't cut square no matter what I did. Eventually, I got so tired of it that I spent an absolutely excessive amount of time adjusting the bevel on my miter saw and recut all my parts smaller just to make it all work. I was honestly way too frustrated with life at this point to film everything at the miter saw, but just know that's what I did. It actually worked out quite nicely, and honestly, as long as you don't tell anyone that that's what happened, no one will be the wiser. That's the nice thing about the early stages of projects like these. When you make a mistake, you can just shrink everything down. Seriously, who's gonna know?
Nobody's gonna know. Nobody's gonna know. They're gonna know.
Trying to decide whether I should reinforce the miters on this table kept me up at night. See, I'm not one of the elect few who have received Festool domino powers. That's a joke, by the way. And I don't have a fancy enough doweling jig to do miters like these either. Fortunately, I stumbled across a helpful Rob Cosman video that described how to make hidden splines in cabinet miters. I'll link it for you to watch later. It was an absolute godsend. For the inner shelves, I ran out of my wide material and had to glue together a panel. The card scraper was really handy for cleaning it up before cutting it down. It's taken me forever to figure out how to put a decent edge on one of these things. So if you're interested in a video about my process, drop a comment and let me know. Since these shelves were going to ride in some stopped dados, I cut rabbets along both sides of both short edges and cut a little off the end. That'll allow these shelves to just kind of tap into the right place and will also help keep the table square during my glue up. After this, I could no longer procrastinate on building the drawers. My design in Fusion 360 contains a completely respectable doweled rabbet connecting the side panels to the drawer fronts. But somewhere along the way, I thought to myself, I should make my life 100 times more difficult, and chose to use dovetails for my drawers. Here's the problem. I'd never cut a dovetail in my life. In fact, I barely even used a handsaw. It's moments like these that I'm exceedingly grateful for the ability to go down the YouTube rabbit hole. I took in hours of content from Rob Cosman, Jonathan Katz-Moses, and Matt Cremona before working up the courage to start my layout and going to the bandsaw to cut my tails. And many thanks to Mr. Spagnolo and Cremona for showing how to use a bandsaw jig for this. Everything was actually going surprisingly well, until it wasn't. I can't even begin to describe the annoyance that I'm feeling right now. Let me show you what happened. This is my sideboard, which is supposed to be my tailboard. I measured everything out on the back. It was perfect. I had everything going perfectly. And then what did I do? I marked out that I wanted to cut these. But what did I cut? I cut myself more tails. I guess, because I don't want this to look crazy, I think I'm gonna have to mill up another backboard. Good thing I have extra. After cutting some new drawer backs, I traced everything back out and cut an actual pin board this time. I sharpened up my chisels and went to work on the cleanup when... This is what I call a shop time band-aid. Chisels are sharp, kids. Chisels are sharp. Overall, I actually ended up pretty pleased with these dovetailed drawers. Sure, there's gaps in places, but I learned a ton on this. If dovetails aren't your thing though, don't feel like this project isn't for you. The plans for this project are going to show you how to assemble these drawers using my original design made with doweled rabbits, and going that route isn't really going to lose you any strength, and if you use some contrasting colored dowels, it's going to look pretty classy too. Everything glued up and fit together beautifully, including the 1/4 inch oak plywood that I set in a groove for the drawer bottoms. At this point, it was time to set the drawers to the side for a bit and go back to the main table assembly, and boy was I excited. In the middle of this build, a local friend reached out after seeing some of my videos and asked if I wanted to give his Shaper Origin a try. Now, if you don't know what that is, it's basically a handheld router with a CNC built in. I jumped on that offer like sauce on ribs, and within a few days I'd uploaded designs for an inlay and was off to the races. How's that for a gross overuse of simile and metaphor? Or is that what those are? Similes and metaphors? Someone let me know which is which, will ya? Thanks. Okay, so believe it or not, that was the easy part. I'm so afraid of this next part. This here is just to tell me where my phone is going to go on the nightstand to charge. I now need to inlay my charger on the back side to the point where I only leave about 1/32 of an inch on this board. If I mess it up, it's going to be visible, it's going to destroy the inlay, it's going to be a very bad day. So I guess there's no time like the present. I'm not kidding here. I was petrified of making this cut. But taking things nice and slow and removing just 1/8 of an inch at a time, I eventually reached my final depth and breathed a sigh of relief. I hadn't broken through the other side. I'd put the recess in the right place, and the charger actually charged through the thin layer of wood remaining. Now I could hot glue the charger and its cable in place and move on to gluing the table cases together. It was important to me that the insides got pre-finished and that the inside corners were masked off with tape. I've made the mistake of not actively trying to prevent glue from drying in the inner corners of confined spaces far too many times, and went out of my way to keep it from happening to me again. You may be wondering why there's plywood CA glued all over the outside of the table, and there's a simple reason for that: clamping blocks. During my dry fits, I'd noticed that there was a slight bow to some of my mitres that was causing them not to seat fully, and this was my solution to get good clamping pressure and seal everything up tight. When you're done, a quick mallet strike knocks them off, and if any wood is going to go anywhere, it's the thin veneer on the plywood, which can just be scraped off with a chisel, a card scraper, or sanded flat. Next it was time for sanding, and I have a question for you. Do those extra fancy, way overpriced sanders from Mirka, Festool, and 3M really make as big of a difference as everyone on YouTube seems to say? Like, what kind of time savings and how much better a finish are we talking about with those things? Now that my bedside table boxes are all built out and sanded and prepped, it's now time for me to take the drawer out of the clamps and fit the drawer to the bedside table. Fitting drawers like this is another thing I picked up from watching Rob Cosman. Again, during my panic binging of all things to do with making drawers without slides. I'll be sure to link his video for you. You can fit drawers like this even if you don't have any hand planes. You'll just be in for a lot more sanding, but at the end of it all, the drawer could slide in place with one finger pushing on the corner just like that. Beautiful. I'm going to be really honest. After all my obsessing over the mitres on these tables, I still ended up with a few gaps in my corners. To fix those, I just dabbed on a little CA glue and sanded around and over the corner to spread some sawdust into the joint and remove the excess glue from the surface. After doing that, I've got to say, it looks like I'm a lot better at cutting mitres than I actually am. I've taken a scrap piece of walnut and kind of sized it down to just generally the size that I'm looking for the handle or the pull. I'm thinking I'm going to take it to the router table and I am going to route a couple of coves, just little ones across each side. Then I'm not sure if I'm going to just chop it off and take that little piece and try to glue it and maybe screw it from the other side in. But then what I figure I want it to be really nice to touch, I'm going to take a combination of rasps and files and sandpaper just to kind of smooth everything out and make it look all nice and feel nice. And yeah, so that's what we're going to do. Let's see if we can make this thing work. Let me thank everyone online that gave me feedback about handle choices. There were a lot of options called out, but I'm so glad I went with these matching wooden poles. They ended up really complementing the piece, especially after I applied my first coat of Osmo top oil. Look at the grain on that walnut pop. After applying a few coats of finish over the course of a week or so, I realized that I had completely forgotten to make room to pass cables up inside the table, so I clamped on a scrap of MDF and used a Forstner bit to make the hole. Afterwards, I cleaned up all the sharp edges with a file and sandpaper. I applied my mark, and then it was time to install the bedside tables and bring my wife in for the big reveal.
Whoa, I guess I shouldn't walk with my eyes closed. Ooh, pretty. I like it.
Go ahead and open the drawer.
Nice and smooth. Oh, got your logo in there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't have an inlay. No, it's really pretty. I like it.
So at the end of the day, that's the only opinion that really matters. Let me show you some close-ups and then we'll wrap this thing up. I really enjoyed this project. It was challenging and frustrating and scary, but also fulfilling. And I love that my wife and I get to use these pieces every single day. If you made it all the way to the end, let me know by using the word diamond in your comment. I read every comment, but I always pay special attention to those who watch my videos all the way through. If you want to build a set of these tables for yourself, I have plans available on my website. The link is in the description. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe, and until next time, make sawdust, not excuses.